Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our special analysis session on AILET 2020. Just 2 hours back from right now at it's around 2:33. You were all writing the AILET exam, and we tried our best that within the shortest time possible, we are able to answer all of your queries and confusions. What will be the cutoff? How did you analyze as to what the AILET 2020 was all about? And that is why we are doing this special session for all of you. What we'll be doing as part of today's session will be that we'll talk about, obviously, as to what kind of questions had come in AILET 2020. What is the expected cutoff in all the subjects, whether it's mathematics, logical reasoning, legal aptitude, GK, and what was the general idea behind the AILET 2020? Was it tough? Was it similar to what had happened? All of these things we are going to discuss over the course of next 30 minutes, and then I'll open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, queries, I'll be very happy to answer those queries and questions for all of you. To begin with, just some basic idea, because many of you I know would be curious about how it is going to be like in future. Just to tell you a little bit about the seat distribution. This year, as you know, NLUD has increased the number of seats. Earlier, there were total number of seats were 80. Now the seats have been increased to 110 in the latest notification. One more confusion, if many of you would be having, would be pertaining to 50% reservation of Delhi for Delhi students in NLU Delhi. That I hope all of you are aware that High Court of Delhi has put a stay on it. And for now, that reservation is not going to be there. So all the seats which were supposed to be open for the unreserved category, those will remain open. Other than that, the percentage of reservation which has been defined by the law, which is 22% for OBC candidates, 15% for STs, 7.5% for ST candidates. All of those things you are already aware and is part of the notification. So the admission process after that, after the results and everything, will go by the seats which have been given by NLUD in the latest notification. So this is something which you need to remember. Before we go into how the paper was this year and what is the expected cutoff for AILET 2020, let's look at a little bit about how AILET has fared in the last 5 to 6 years. So if you see, for general category, the general cutoff in the last 2 to 3 years have been something around 70 to 80 marks, something around that, the highest to the last score, as you can see, where the admissions have taken place. You can see the marks for all categories of students. So you will get a general idea. This year's, if I tell you about AILET 2020, more or less the feedback that we have received from all the students who have given the tests was that AILET 2020 was more or less not a surprise. Okay, it was more or less on the same pattern, same kinds of questions. Few here and there were surprises in some parts of legal aptitude reasoning, legal GK questions. There were some surprises. There were a few things in verbal which happened. Those kinds of questions came for the first time. But more or less, the paper was as per the AILET pattern. So AILET is generally known for a kind of a paper which is a notch above a CLAT, in the sense that you have less time and you have to attempt same number of questions. More or less, the difficulty level of AILET 2020 was above moderate. So it was above average paper. It wasn't too difficult. It wasn't too easy also. It was a little bit more than moderate paper. There were some subjects which were on the normal end, like for example, GK was quite decent, legal aptitude was quite decent. But if you look at mathematics, the number of questions, the kind of questions in mathematics, the level was quite high. In fact, if you look at BBA and the other entrances, the kind of questions which were asked in mathematics were of little bit higher level. Logical reasoning also was a section which was on a little bit tougher side, but not necessarily because of the kind of questions, but because of basically more time consuming questions, right? So it was a little bit lengthier compared to how generally the questions are. So that section was difficult, some part because of the questions and more because of the lengthiness. Verbal ability, more or less, was a little bit difficult because there were a lot of verbal, basically vocab related questions which were there. And as I said, when we do subject wise analysis, I will tell you as to what kind of questions, because all of you have given the AILET test, so more or less you know as to what kind of questions were there. But we'll have a small discussion on what kind of questions had come, and on the basis of that, we'll see what the expected cutoff is going to be for AILET, right? So let's look at one by one. Uh, this is what we expect the AILET 2020 cutoff for this year. As I said, AILET 2020 was not a surprise. It wasn't too easy of a paper, nor it was very, very difficult that the students can attempt. And that is the reason, if you look at the expected cutoff, it is expected to be around the same range which was last year. A good score in AILET, if you want to be in the top, is around 82, 83 marks. That is where I feel the marks will lie. But 74 to 80 marks is where I feel if you are expecting that much score, you have a very, very good chance of succeeding. Negative marking here and there, obviously, if you've attempted a lot of questions which you were not very sure of, the marks can go a little bit down. So expect the score very, very similar to, if you remember, 2019 and 18, where the cutoff was 72.75 and 71.25. This year's cutoff is also expected to be around the same. If you look at quantitative aptitude, if you look at mathematics, our prediction is that because the level of mathematics was a little bit on the higher side, maximum students with a decent attempt, you should be able to get 3 to 4 marks. The questions were, one or two questions were there from ratio. You remember the question on alcohol, 80% and others. Profit and loss, there were some questions. Compound interest, simple interest, not directly, but if you remember that installments wala question was there in mathematics. Integer based module X and all that, there was one question on that. Probability, there was one question. One question was on numbers. One question was also on work. So looking at the difficulty level of quantitative aptitude, I won't rank mathematics as the easier section in AILET. Mathematics, according to me, was above average if you look at AILET 2020, and that is the reason. Even if you are able to score 2 to 3 marks, I feel that that's a decent score to get if your mathematics is not great. But students who are able to work in mathematics, they can also expect something like 6 to 7 marks here, right? Coming to general knowledge, now general knowledge was a mixed bag in the sense that there were some questions which were very, very obvious. And then there were some questions which were out of static GK also. If you would have looked at the questions carefully, you would see that 17 to 18 questions directly came out of your basically your AILET mocks and also the other mocks that you have given for other entrances. So in our analysis, we found out that there were 17 to 18 questions directly from the mocks. So if you have given those mocks properly, we can expect your score to be something around 20 to 22. So there were questions on Nobel Peace Prize. There were questions pertaining to Singaporean logistics agreement, Blue Dot Network. There was a question India US ka. One thing that we found out was that even when you look at legal aptitude or GK, apart from the fact that there were direct questions where you had to pick one answer, a majority of the questions, as you know, were more or less explanatory, where explanation of a particular point was given, and then you had to select as to which one was correct, two was correct, all of them were correct. This was a trend which I saw in GK also, in legal GK, which was a lot this year. That there also it was found, and same applied to logical reasoning. There were questions on, if you remember, Padma Bhushan also. Sustainable development goals, where it came from for the first time, there were questions like that. Ajanta caves, there was a question on CAA also. So there were questions on current affairs, but there were some questions on static GK also. But because majority of questions were current affairs, they were more or less easier. Static GK questions were a little bit tricky. So anybody who has studied static GK they could get those 3-4 marks extra. But according to our prediction, if you have made a decent attempt at GK, if you gave all the IMS mocks properly, then you would have scored something like 22 marks. Okay, now this is a little bit on the higher side, considering that your majority of the questions were already from the mocks themselves, right? So that is something there. If you look at reasoning, this is one section which I thought was a little bit tricky, in the sense that there were some questions, if you know, there were two arrangement based questions, five questions each, time consuming in one sense. One was on circular, the other one was on matrix. Clocks and calendars, there were around 3 to 4 questions. Conclusion based questions were a lot. So 3 to 4 questions I saw where shorts, basically 2-3 lines ka passages were given. You had to conclude from it. There were assumption based questions also, strong, weak. There was one question. So if you look at the overall scheme, if you look at direction based questions, if you look at basically logical puzzle based question, one was there. Odd man out, there were 2-3 questions. Family tree, there were 3-4 questions. So there were portions which were easier. There were portions which were very, very time consuming. So anybody who was able to manage their time properly between verbal, legal aptitude and logical reasoning would be able to score something like 17 to 18 marks for sure in legal reasoning and reasoning. So that is something that our analysis tells us. If you look at legal reasoning, for some students, it was a little bit surprising, in the sense that students were expecting questions based on assumptions or sometimes even conclusions, assertion wale questions. Those questions more or less were not there. Majority of the questions were of two types. One was your legal aptitude, legal reasoning based questions. And the second part was more or less legal GK, which many students thought was a little bit surprising. There were a lot of questions on legal GK. So if you look at your legal GK portion, also right to internet was a question. There were questions on preventive detention. Anti-defection law was also there. International Criminal Court, there was a question. There were questions on CAA. There was one question on CAA. Diseases and Epidemic Act, Essential Commodities Act, SC/ST Act. So a lot of questions were from the laws and policies which were passed by the government in the recent time. In fact, if you would have looked at your questions carefully, generally the trend in AILET is the last 3-4 months are very crucial. Okay, but this year's GK, you will also find that from October onwards, a lot of questions came. In fact, there were a lot of questions from the events which were surrounding September, October, November. So if you would have read those current affairs questions, and most of them, as you would know, were very direct in nature, right? So there, I think you will find that GK and legal GK coincided. So there we expect 18 to 19 marks for students. In legal reasoning, as you know, a majority of questions were from basics of contracts. Okay, so offer, acceptance, if especially for IMS students, you would remember LA 2.1, where we discussed all the basic aspects of contract. A lot of questions came from contracts. There were questions on defamation. One question was there on defamation. One question was on misrepresentation. Nuisance, there was one question. One question I think was on criminal law also. So homicide wala, there was one question. More or less, I expect that if you have done the legal GK part better, you can go on the higher side, because legal reasoning was not a big challenge. I found out that the bigger challenge, according to me, was legal GK, because in legal GK there were a lot of questions, as I said, surrounding different laws. There were questions where explanation of a particular law was given, and you were supposed to say whether all 4 of them are correct, or 1 or 2 are correct, or 3 are correct. That was something that I found to be a general scheme of the questions, right? So those questions came in reasoning also, those questions came in general knowledge also, right? So that was in legal reasoning for all of you. JK domicile law, in fact, there was a question in legal reasoning. If you look at verbal, the feedback that I've received from students in verbal was that verbal somehow was little tough. Now in AILET, it is expected that verbal will be on a tougher side, but the kind of questions which came were a little bit different. I won't say they were very, very different, but a little bit different. So what were the question types? Basically, there were questions on grammatically errors you had to correct, whether there were spellings, whether there were punctuations, whether there were tenses, you had to correct those. Vocab based questions were a lot of questions were there from vocab. So around 10 questions I saw that were there from vocab. 5 of them were basically synonym based, which is the closest word according to you, and others were more or less fill in the blanks. There were paired words were also there. uh, uh, Substitution, so matching a particular line, and then you had to substitute the words. Those kinds of questions were there, 3 4 questions. Looking at the overall basically verbal ability ka section, I would predict that the question paper was more or less a little bit higher than what anybody could have expected. But they kept the overall difficulty level of the paper to the same extent. I don't think that the difficulty level of AILET 2020 was much more than AILET 2019, AILET 2018. It was generally on the similar lines. There were few surprises here and there. In verbal, there was more vocab. In legal reasoning, legal GK was there. Reasoning is expected to be lengthier. These were some things which we thought we'll share with you. You can do your analysis of how much you are scoring. We have given the expected good scores as per our analysis of the questions, the difficulty level of the paper, and according to us, a total of 74 to 80 would be enough out of 150 to take you to one of the premier law schools of the country, National Law University, Delhi. Okay, so this is our general analysis. There are a few important things that I thought I'll share with you pertaining to AILET. What they have notified as of now is that the question paper with the provisional answer key will be uploaded on the university website or on the other platforms that they have mentioned. One very important thing I want all of you to remember is that you can submit your grievances. If you have faced any issues during the paper, you can submit it by September 27 till 5 p.m., which is tomorrow 5 p.m. After this, if you send any grievous or any grievances or any kind of representation to them, they won't be taking it into consideration. So please be careful about if you have faced any issues while writing the test. If you feel there were some issues, please write them. I have written down the mail also below. You can basically remember these mail IDs. You can send your grievances to these mail IDs, right? Now, one thing, what is the future course of action? Now, please keep in mind that you can't change the past. You have given the AILET exam already. Don't stop working for CLAT, irrespective of how AILET 2020 went for all of you, okay? If it went horribly bad, you can't change it. If it went very, very good, you can't change it. We don't have to be complacent just because our AILET went too good, okay? We have to keep in mind that the paper was same for everybody, right? So if it went too good, we don't have to stop working towards CLAT exam, which is, again, the biggest exam in India for law. If it went bad, or if you felt that it did not go as per your expectations, don't worry whatsoever. You have a very, very good chance in one of the most important exams, which is coming up day after tomorrow. So don't lose hope at all. Don't get demoralized if you feel ki, sir, this I would have done correctly. You can't change the future, okay? Whatever is done is done. Focus on what is lying ahead, okay? CLAT 2020, as you know, is coming up. One thing that I want to tell all of you is you have worked hard enough in the last 1 year, or for last few months. You have worked enough on CLAT 2020. One day of work is not going to change your performance drastically, okay? Use this time, 1.5 day that is left with you, to basically calming yourself, take some rest, Do not go after mocks or do not go after GK that I have to read every single thing that I've done till date. You can't change basically what you've already done for so many months in a day's time, because eventually, as I always tell you, right, aptitude exams, they want to see how can you handle pressure. It's not about how much you know. It's about how much you can do in those 2 hours when you are under pressure and the clock is ticking, right? So please keep in mind that we have to go there with positive attitude. We have to go there completely motivated, that irrespective of how we have done our paper, whether it was too good or too bad in the past, we will give our 100% towards CLAT 2020. Okay, take proper rest before the exam. There is no need, as I said, to take 2-3 mock tests in a day, which I see sometimes students taking. If you really want to take it, take one mock test today, but tomorrow spend your time, give your body some rest, okay, so that whatever you know till date, you are able to answer those questions in the exam. Okay, one last check that all you need to do is check all the formalities that you have done, see all the instructions that CLAT has given as to how the exam will be conducted, see that you have all the proper documentation if anything required by the CLAT authorities. Okay, reach the center in advance, don't be late. Today also I came across some instances where students were late, irrespective of them telling you ki you should come 1.5 hours in advance. Please follow the instructions and guidelines of CLAT authorities properly, so that whatever you have been waiting for so long, you are able to give it with 100% of your energy and attention, right? So I think this is it. I hope that whatever we have just mentioned was of some help to all of you. Don't spend too much time analyzing your AILET performance. Right now is the time where you take some rest, you work towards the exam which is coming up. All the best to all the students who are going to write the CLAT exam. We are going to do a CLAT analysis session right after the CLAT exam. So we will let you know on the IMS GSL Telegram group, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you are able to get regular updates pertaining to CLAT. If there are any updates pertaining to AILET, that also is something that you will be able to get from the YouTube channel. So thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them for 1 or 2 minutes. Please put your questions in the live section, in the live chat section. Okay, so going by some of the things that you have put, cutoff for NLS, I don't think it is that relevant right now because the exam is going to come. Okay, CLAT exam will be coming in a few days, like day after tomorrow, obviously. We'll have a session for all of you, so don't worry. Abhishek, OBC general cutoff, so there is no drastic difference there. Okay, so keep that in mind. Uh, I don't think, Smriti, there is any requirement for taking any more mocks. If you really want to take something, take some rest right now, okay? I did not want to bombard you with a lot of things today because you've just finished the paper. But this analysis, I hope you have understood as to how much you can expect to get in your exam and what kind of scores you can expect, okay? Any other questions that you have in mind? Please type it in the section. How many people are expected to take CLAT 2020? So around the total number of registrations, I think around 66,000. So even if you remove like 5-10%, more than 60,000 people will definitely write the exam. Zahan. Any other questions from anybody pertaining to AILET or other exams? Yes. So basically, I think, as I said, the expected cutoff is around 74 to 78 to 80 marks, as I said. That is something that you can uh, expect the cutoff to be. Okay. General knowledge also, I mentioned that it will be around 20 to 22 marks. If you have paid attention to your mocks carefully, this is something that you can expect to get. Okay. So I think this is it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I hope the session has helped you understand as to what kind of questions had come in the exam and what is expected to be a good score in the AILET exam. Please, as I said, don't stop working for your exam, which is coming up. Give your best shot. Our best wishes are there with all of you. Two events that I want to repeat will be happening for all of you on the IMS GSL YouTube channel. One will be at 8:30 p.m. Today as part of our Ignite series, where you will be able to interact with a senior associate from Khaitan and Company, one of the topmost law firms of the country. Please attend that session today. And after CLAT exam, we have another analysis session coming up for CLAT. So please attend the session so that you can get very good idea about all of these things. So thank you so much, everyone. It was wonderful interacting with all of you. We'll be back with the CLAT analysis after the CLAT exam. Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.